Jay, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. Congratulations on Hard Eyes.
Thank you.
Honestly, I had a great time with that movie. Um,
Awesome.
and and it's funny that we should get to talk because I think one of the things that impacted me the most was that opening score.
Oh
It
yeah.
was there was like a lot of adventure in it, but also dread. I mean, there was like that kind of almost like psycho feel mixed in with like a Jerry Goldsmith, the Mummy adventure. What we're gonna so I really set the tone, I think, for a good time, and I enjoyed that. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
developing that.
Yeah. I mean, the opening, so many of the references and the things that Josh and I had been talking about were just, films from the 80s and 90s, really, and like how, those yeah, scores were used and the fun of that. He's a big fan of the Amblin stuff as well, so it always has a sense of adventure and fun element to it. It's not, trying to be just like a straight terrifying horror score. So I think, going back and referencing the classics and referencing, also Bernard Herrmann, but I'm also very much into concert classical music. That's what I studied. And so I went back and studied a lot of my favorites from like the early 20th century and the people who pioneered a lot of the sounds that are used in this score. Stravinsky or Penderecki, Xenakis, are composers that I was really influenced by when I started studying classical music composition. So, and then obviously there's always a bit of of humor and irony, peppered in with the needle drops. Rob Lowery is an incredible music supervisor who helped Josh pick out all those songs that are interspersed throughout. And so it really is trying to find, we found a balance between how we use those things and the timings of it that lended a sense of humor and fun playfulness, but still have a pretty aggressive edge to the soundtrack. But I think using the sort of strings in that sort of style that has that sort of classic stocking character to it, was something that I wanted to do out of the gate for sure. So you get that in a multitude of levels in that first sequence, starting from when Hard Eyes actually shows up and starts chasing one of the characters through to the end of the sort of the big reveal of his face at the wine press. So you get different variations of that same stalking theme that sort of introduce the main his main theme, and sort of what are the sound world and palette's going to be and how we're going to use that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really well done. You did mention strings, which is something that I always love, especially in horror. What is it about some of those notes, specifically some of those higher notes that blend so well to the genre and just kind of that really quick pace and just very anxiety written moment
Yeah.
that violins seem to be very well suited for.
Yeah, well, there's a number of things. So like in the more rhythmic stocking stuff, I think it's just, when like using sort of really aggressive attacks to it and creating these kind of cluster effects that have a sort of pounding rhythmic element to it that maybe people would be more familiar with, like out of electric guitar almost, like it has a really aggressive attack, that feels almost distorted because they're playing multiple notes at the same time and hitting hitting multiple strings at the same time with a really aggressive like down bow kind of vibe, so you can really get a lot of the texture out of the bow and the strings. So there's a lot of that, and that's more in the rhythmic stuff, just really digging into the pressure of the bow on the strings that gives it a grit. And then yeah, with the other sort of textural stuff, that's a lot of fun, like aleatoric elements, which is just sort of essentially giving the instrumentalists instructions on sort of what to play over a given series of time, but it's not actually so specifically notated on what notes to play. So they play within a range and they play rhythms and all that stuff. So it has this organized, chaotic feel to it. So you can kind of get these crazy gestures and crazy sort of textures of strings bouncing around, whether they're hitting it with the backside wooden side of the bow, or they're hitting with that, or they're strumming it with their fingers or plucking or whatever. You can get those sort of crazy moving textures that go up and down and like get louder and then like seeming bouncing and kind of chopping all over the place. So those are all super fun textures to play with. But yeah, I feel like Penderecki was a composer that used a lot of graphic notation to achieve those types of sounds, but in concert music back in like mid-century, 20th century. So it's always fun to go back and look at that stuff.
What's interesting about Hard Eyes also that is you mentioned it, you took a lot of inspiration from older films and things of
Mhm.
that nature. Do you
Yeah.
feel that because of that, you can insert nostalgia in a film without necessarily being overbearing as to, oh, look at this, look at this. It's just really the sound that's going to remind you of, a different time a period and put that in the film without necessarily having to be overbearing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we wanted it to have that sort of nostalgic feel, and I think like, just the type of composition that it is, lends itself to referencing that because those composers at that time were influenced by the same sort of concert composers, I think that I was. And so, writing in a style that has that traditional element and has a melodic and rhythmic sort of core to it that isn't just ethereal and ambient or just texture or just synths or something like that. When you're working with an orchestral palette and treating it and writing it for orchestra as an orchestra would play it, it'll naturally have this classic feel, just because there are traditions there, and ways to integrate that feels authentic, and you can still make it fresh based on the way that you integrate other elements to it, and the ideas that you bring to it. But yeah, it's not trying to be, it's not trying to break new ground with a new type of sound and approach to the orchestra. It's using a classic sound, and just bringing new musical material to it.
Yeah, it sounds like that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Speaking of fun, I think one of the things that really makes Hard Eyes work is its blend of horror and a rom-com, and really leaning into both of those genres really unapologetically and
yeah,
allowing them to breathe. With that,
yeah,
you need a good blend of obviously music. What was
yeah.
your approach to that when you saw kind of the blend to make sure it worked well?
Yeah, I mean, both things we wanted to treat authentically and, with equal attention to detail in the way that we approach the sound. So, like we really wanted to create a convincing love theme, that has an authenticity and an earnestness to it that doesn't, go too hard and make it cheesy, but is really supports a an already successful like plot line in the film that pays off with sort of the romantic aspect of it. But I think that's a delicate balance. Like you kind of treat them separately and allow them space to live within each other. So like I like to oftentimes start with the main theme or something when I get started on a new project. So that love theme at the end is one that one of the first cues that I started with. There were a couple horror cues, and that was the most important one, and one of the hardest ones to nail and get the right tone. And then once we established that, then we brought elements of that and trickled it back in and started to seed it in those little moments where you kind of get a glimpse of, oh, maybe they're going to get together, but it always gets interrupted, so which was fun. So making sure that we were treating those moments with a sense of authenticity and not irony, and then there are a few moments in the rom-com elements where we kind of you know maybe go a little bit like on the nose because we're trying to reference, when they're also referencing other rom-coms, in dialogue. We really lean into that aesthetic, to kind of play up that sense of humor. It's sort of one of the meta moments of the movie. But yeah, so I think just making sure that we were being very true to both genres, equally, and respectful of them and their traditions, and then finding the humor in when they're sort of pitted together and juxtaposed, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. Um, just to kind of maybe toot your own horn a little bit, tell me how important, the sound is to horror because, we think of some of those iconic moments in the past. And I did this test with my daughter where I would play different bites from different, like the Jaws
Yeah.
soundtrack, or the Psycho one or whatever. And it's like, tell me the movie, tell me the mood. And we were able to identify very quickly. And I found that with Hard Eyes, it was kind of the same thing. I was listening to to just the music on its own, and
Yeah.
it created a level of horror that I didn't need the picture. My mind was
Yeah.
able to kind of create it. And
Yeah.
then sometimes, in reverse, if I mute a horror movie,
Yeah.
it doesn't hit the same. Not even close. Not even with the
Yeah.
jump scares and monsters and
Yeah.
things like that. How
Yeah.
important is the music?
I mean, yeah, it's vitally important for sure. And I think Josh is such a student of the craft, and knows sound design and knows music and how to use it. But it's one of those tools that you know just like it's not that more music is necessarily better, and like the way that you use it and when you choose to use it and when you choose not to use it is equally as important. The silence, the things between the notes, the things between the cues are just as important as the cues themselves. And so where it's all intentional tools to be used when you're telling a story or to play with tension and release. So for instance, there are jump scares where or moments where you could create tension, you could really lean into a moment as they're creeping around something and then build to something, but you don't want to give away what's around the corner, right? So instead, you choose to not have music there and keep it silent and bring things down to such a small level so that people start to draw their focus inward to the picture. It like really creates a sense of attention, and you can smack them with a jump scare. So it's all sort of very deliberate manipulation, if you will, by just using all of your senses, because we are as animals highly attuned to the experiences around us, and like the sound is so much a part of that, and it's such a psychological experience when you know how to use it, you can really manipulate. So
Yeah, and I think that's why I always advocate for watching horror and actually any movie in theaters is because you're gonna get the best sound quality there, especially in a room that's like built with
totally.
Dolby Atmos and you're just like living in it and
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it doesn't
so
quite hit the same
but
on a phone. It doesn't quite hit the same on a phone or a laptop. So
no, it really doesn't. Um, when you're working on a horror film, how much are you able to work on ahead of time versus I need maybe some of these scenes to kind of build to some of those moments where there's like a jump scare or there's a chase,
yeah.
there's something maybe a little bit more specific that you want to write or play to.
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly start to develop themes and sounds and do your research, I think, ahead of time. That's kind of the way I like to do it, is more kind of focus on my research up until I actually see something. Because I can get a sense from the script and from, my conversations with the director, and in this case with Josh, like what we were referencing and the films that influenced him, and that he wanted to kind of draw inspiration from. So definitely brushing up on that stuff and getting a sense there. But yeah, like putting pen to paper, I tend to wait until a little bit later, when there's a cut that's coming together, so I kind of really understand how it looks and feels and the production design and all, how the dynamics between the actors. I think all of that stuff is really important information for me to understand where I live in that space, because that stuff all comes before I get involved. But sometimes I'll have ideas for melodic elements or themes and whatnot, but it's not until I see it with picture that I'll really know what I want. So I kind of do, yeah, a lot of pre prep work by studying scores, or refreshing myself on certain techniques, or yeah, creating mood playlists of scores or music that inspires me, that might get me in the headspace to start to dive in and explore my own world. So
It's interesting because so much is dictated by the composer and what he puts in the film that I mean, you do it all. This is your job, so I couldn't imagine being able to look at film scenes and specifically without any type of music, and then
mhm.
being the one who has to build that. That seems incredible.
Yeah, it's a fun job, and it just takes a lot of time and practice to kind of get to that point where you know what a scene would need. But there's tools along the way, that like filmmakers use temp score, they use scores from other films, to kind of, as they're editing. Some people don't. Some people edit without temp music, but at least many do, where it'll at least give you some sort of idea for the tone of what they're looking for. You never want to just do what's in the temp music. You want to come to it with a fresh and cohesive approach to the film itself, so that you're doing something unique to the project. But yeah, at least gives you a sense of structure and sort of where they want music to come in and out. And you have all those conversations, and along the way, like spotting sessions where you're watching the film down with the director and the editor, and maybe music supervisors or people that weigh in on the creative side. And you really talk about the function of music from cue to cue, and like what's going on in this scene, and what do we need to, what are we going to lean into, and what are we trying to say. So
Yeah, that's great. Final question. I
yeah.
know, as a student of your craft, you never finished learning. What is something that maybe you picked up during working on Hard Eyes that you're gonna take into future projects?
Yeah, I mean, on this one, I think I was really trying to push my string writing a bit, both on the textural side of stuff, and also, the runs and things that I use. It's such a specific technical thing, but I've never worked on a film that allowed me to really um, be so bombastic and big and free in my writing. I guess my work on Franklin was probably the closest that I've gotten to it. But this one I really got to swing for it with the string writing. And so yeah, I think the runs are, and the sort of string writing are things in particular I'm pretty proud of. Just wanting to lean into some stuff that feels a little more virtuosic and wild at times, so
Well, thank you so much for your time, Jay, and giving us an insight behind the music of Hard Eyes.
yeah.
I thought it was a great film. I loved
Thanks
the
so much.
score. So
Yeah.
your time means a lot to me, and I hope to
Yeah,
catch you on a future project.
same, man. Yeah, appreciate your time, man. All right,
It's nice to
looking forward.
meet you.
All right, you too.